Thank you very much, and greetings from Scotland. I want to try and give you a view and an impression of where we stand after what's just happened, and hope that it may inform the discussions and the decisions that you take here. But just to try and recap on where we've got to in Scotland over the last few years, because it has been a time of really quite momentous political change, with more things happening in a few years than had happened in the previous 30 years. And in particular, it has been a time of political realignment. And we now have a situation, I believe, where the two great radical traditions that have created and been part of and driven Scottish history, that on the one hand of the desire for national autonomy, and on the other the desire for social and economic justice. Those two traditions are more or less fused in a new contemporary political hybrid, which is a progressive force that commands the majority support of the population. And the reason why that has come about, in my belief, is all to do with the process of the independence referendum that happened in the period 2011 to 2014. And because of that, two things had to happen. Those who wanted an independent Scotland had to answer the question, what sort of country would this be? Who would be in charge? Who would control it? How would this thing run? How would that thing run? And in answering those questions, they, to a man and women, came forward with answers that says, we want Scotland to be more equal, to be more tolerant, to be more outward-looking, to be more inclusive, to be fairer than the country that we live in today. And so for them, independence was presented in the Yes campaign of 2011 to 14 as a means to achieve social and economic change. And likewise, those from the labour movement tradition, the socialist tradition, who had long thought during most of the 20th century that this constitutional debate was a distraction, was a diversion from class politics. They began to realise that independence, rather than being a distraction from social justice, could be the midwife that would achieve and deliver the things that they had longed for all of their lives. And so these traditions came together in a powerful Yes campaign that dominated Scottish politics in that time, and which did not win the referendum, but because of the process and because of the inclusive and positive way that it was organised, it left an incredibly powerful legacy. I am one of the beneficiaries of that legacy, if beneficiary be the word. I joined the SNP 3 days after the referendum campaign failed, along with about 80,000 other people. To put that in perspective, that would be, in a UK sense, that would be a political party with more than 1.2 million members. That is the surge that has happened to the Scottish National Party. And we achieved a situation by May 2015, we won 56 out of the 59 Westminster seats in that general election. And what has happened is that the entire politics of Scotland have been realigned, in communities, streets, whole towns that once used to be solid Labour supporting areas have now put their trust in the Scottish National Party. And I say that not in any sectarian way, but simply to point out that I think what has happened in Scotland, which is different than the situation in England and in Northern England in particular, is that as Labour drifted away from its traditional working class support, the electorate in Scotland had an alternative ready-made and ready to step into the gap. And in many ways what has happened is that the principal Social Democratic Party of Scotland has been replaced, and it is now the SNP rather than the Labour Party. And it was that party in government and in the community that fought the EU referendum campaign that we have just had. And I have to say I'm dismayed at this most miserable of referendum campaigns that we have had throughout the country. I thought it was uninspiring and uninspired. It plumbed new depths in terms of the political discourse of this country, and it was fought in so many communities, not as a referendum on the EU, but on a referendum on immigration and on immigrants. And it has left a situation now of poison in many of our communities. But let us not kid ourselves that that's something that happened in 3 or 6 months. That is a phenomenon that has been decades in the making. And now, at least, as Clive said, if this is a wake-up call to do something about it, I am glad about that. We have a situation now in Scotland where we tried to run a positive campaign, although having been, frankly, battle fatigued, it was very difficult to do so. But we did run a positive campaign. We stressed the social benefits, the international benefits, the benefits of migration. We talked about that in Scotland because, God, we desperately need people to come and live in our country. So we ran a positive campaign about being a positive European nation, and we won the referendum. We actually won with a surprisingly large turnout and result, because for many people in Scotland, they thought this wasn't really their referendum, to be honest. This was essentially a referendum that only happened to satisfy an argument on the right of English politics, and many people felt resentful about it. But they turned out and they voted for the EU in a positive way. So we now have a situation in Scotland where people voted in 2014 to remain part of the United Kingdom, specifically on the promise that by doing that, they would remain part of the European Union. And then they voted in 2016 to remain in the European Union, only to find the majority of the United Kingdom saying that they wished to leave. Now, on the face of it, those two aspirations of people to stay in the United Kingdom and to stay in the European Union cannot both be met at this time. And what the Scottish Government is now engaged in doing is in trying to see if there is any way in which that circle can be squared, to see if there is a relationship that can be established, as yet unknown, that would allow people in Scotland to keep their European passports while people elsewhere in the UK might lose theirs. There has been talk of a reverse Greenland situation, for those of you that study constitutional politics, whereby Scotland might take over the UK's role as being a member of the European Union while most of the UK left. But in order to do that, of course, that would require the Scottish Parliament to have additional competences and powers that it doesn't have at the moment. So most of all, that would require political will, not just in Scotland, but in Westminster and in Brussels, to allow these special arrangements to evolve over the next few months and perhaps the next year. Now, I do not know at this stage whether that is going to be possible, but I want you to be very clear that what we are engaged in is a genuine exercise to see if it is possible to find some way for the aspirations of the people of Scotland to be delivered, and that is to stay within the European Union. If it is not, if all possible avenues to achieve that have been tried and are exhausted, then it is the case that we may only have one way to achieve that end, and that is to ask people to reconsider the vote they took in 2014 and to vote yet again on the proposition that Scotland should become an independent country. And as Nicola Sturgeon has said, that option is now very much... Okay, that option is very much now back on the table. And I just wanted to, in my 30 seconds, say this. We are trying to look after the people who voted for us. We are trying to see if we can carve a way for a new Scotland in this 21st century. But very much, that is not a means to keep us separate. That is a means to allow us to participate more in Britain, in Europe, and in the world. And you will find us in Scotland great friends and allies, I hope, when it comes to talking about a progressive alliance and achieving constitutional change throughout all of these islands. And I hope that actually one day you will see that the campaign for Scottish independence will deliver such a constitutional shake-up that it will be to the benefit of everyone in all parts of the United Kingdom.